The King's speech. Charles III addresses the nation for the first time.
As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation.
Tonight, at a service at St Paul's Cathedral, the first official rendition of the national anthem under the reign of King Charles III. We are at Buckingham Palace this evening, where the King spoke as Britain began its period of royal mourning. Across the country, bells tolled in memory of Queen Elizabeth II, while gun salutes were sounded around the world. In the House of Commons, a minute's silence with tributes spanning the political divide. The new king announced Prince William will be the new Prince of Wales, and Catherine, the first Princess of Wales since Diana. And in a day of memorable moments, a kiss for the king.
We share hands, and I said, "May I kiss you?" He said, "Well, yes." That's it.
What was it like to kiss a king?
Oh my God! Oh, I nearly fell.
From Buckingham Palace, this is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening from Buckingham Palace, from where the new king tonight addressed the nation and paid an emotional tribute to his darling mama, the Queen. King Charles described her as an inspiration. He said her devotion to the country and the Commonwealth had never wavered. Like his mother, he made his own pledge to serve our country and said that his own life will now change with his new responsibilities. Earlier, King Charles gave us a glimpse of how his reign may look. After arriving in London from Balmoral, he held a walkabout, warmly thanking and shaking the hands of some of the thousands of well-wishers outside the palace here. One woman even gave the new king a kiss. Later, he held his first audience with Prime Minister Liz Truss, also brand new, of course, to the job. Well, tomorrow he'll be formally proclaimed king at the Accession Council, a traditional ceremony which will be televised for the first time. In the first of our reports, James Mates looks at the day's historic events.
The new king returns to his capital, stepping off the flight south from Aberdeen, accompanied by his Queen Consort. The Royal Standard now flying for him in the Sovereign's motorcade for the drive into central London. In deep mourning, it is less than 24 hours since the death of his beloved mother. But the demands of public and constitutional duties make no provision for compassionate leave. Above his new home, the Royal Standard is raised for his arrival, a flag that is never flown at half-mast. The Constitution demands that while the Queen may be dead, the King lives. And the King made an immediate statement of what his monarchy will look like. There was no hesitation but to step from the car and greet the tens of thousands waiting outside the palace. From day one, he wants openness and approachability. The faces of most who wanted to shake his hand, even to kiss his hand, showed deep sympathy for King Charles the man. Sorry for your loss, they told him. But just by being here, the crowds signalled too their acceptance that the country now has a new head of state, that constitutional monarchy goes on.
God save our gracious King, God save our King, God save the King.
For almost 10 minutes, he shook hands and accepted flowers and kind words. The oldest monarch ever to ascend the throne, there need be few worries he has the energy for the job. Joined by his wife, the King and Queen viewed the hundreds of bouquets of flowers, many bearing very personal tributes to his mother, that already adorn the railings in front of Buckingham Palace. And then, to the faint echoes of a bugle sounding inside, the royal couple walked through the gates to take possession of their new home. While the Constitution demands continuity, the well-planned, well-rehearsed displays of respect and mourning for a departed monarch have begun to play out. The bells tolling for Her Majesty at St Paul's and at Westminster Abbey, and at cathedrals and churches here in Rochester, Kent, across the land. Followed an hour later by a royal gun salute by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. 96 rounds, one for each year of the Queen's life. At the Tower of London, Hyde Park, Edinburgh Castle, Cardiff Castle, Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland, and from His Majesty's Naval Base, Gibraltar. In the House of Commons, before a day given entirely to tributes to the Queen, their own mark of respect and of memory.
Order, order. I invite the House to rise and observe a minute's silence in memory of Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II.
But the business of government must go on, and just 3 days after an audience with one monarch, Prime Minister Liz Truss was driven to the palace for an audience with a second.
Your Majesty. Very good to see you.
Tomorrow morning, Charles will officially be proclaimed king by the Accession Council at St James's Palace, and only after that will he hold an audience with the entire cabinet. Such are the procedures and protocols that have lain unused for 7 decades. Tonight, the King gave his first address to the country, speaking both for the nation and for himself about his late mother.
I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow. Throughout her life, Her Majesty the Queen, my beloved mother, was an inspiration, an example to me and to all my family. And we owe her the most heartfelt debt any family could owe to their mother, for her love, affection, guidance, understanding, and example. Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing. That promise of lifelong service I renew to you all today. In 1947, on her 21st birthday, she pledged in a broadcast from Cape Town to the Commonwealth to devote her life, whether it be short or long, to the service of her peoples. That was more than a promise. It was a profound personal commitment which defined her whole life. She made sacrifices for duty. Her dedication and devotion as sovereign never wavered through times of change and progress, through times of joy and celebration, and through times of sadness and loss. I pay tribute to my mother's memory, and I honor her life of service. I know that her death brings great sadness to so many of you, and I share that sense of loss beyond measure with you all. As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And wherever you may live in the United Kingdom, or in the realms and territories across the world, and whatever may be your background or beliefs, I shall endeavor to serve you with loyalty, respect, and love, as I have throughout my life. As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall and takes on the responsibilities for the Duchy of Cornwall, which I have undertaken for more than 5 decades. Today, I am proud to create him Prince of Wales, Tywysog Cymru, the country whose title I've been so greatly privileged to bear during so much of my life and duty. With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas. To my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
At St Paul's Cathedral, a congregation of 2,000 that included senior politicians and clergy, but for the most part members of the public who had taken seats on a first-come, first-served basis, listened to the speech before the start of a service of prayer and reflection.
We give thanks for a life of devotion to God, her Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer, and of devotion to all her people.
For the country, life will continue in the days ahead, but they will be days marked by ceremonial and solemn memorial as the Queen's body begins its journey to Holyrood House, then to lie at rest in St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, before being brought south to lie in state at Westminster Hall. James Mates, ITV News.
The new King's walkabout outside the gates of Buckingham Palace here will, I think, live long in the memory, especially for those who could barely believe that they were able to greet him in person. Paul Brand had a front row seat and he heard from some of the lucky few.
A police outrider was the crowd's first clue. Phones raised in anticipation. They caught sight of the King's car. Cheers and chants
God save the King!
for the man who'd left London a son and returned here their sovereign. These were symbolic steps as King and Queen Consort, making the people their priority. We're sorry, they told him. I've been dreading it, he replied. In one moment, they were both mourning and meeting a monarch.
Looking at his face, he looks really devastated. So he told you that he'd been dreading this day. You could really sense that.
Yes, definitely. Oh yeah, he looked visibly upset, didn't he? He looked really upset. When I saw him, it was like I felt the pain, and then for him to have to be in front of all these people and hold it together, it's a lot.
for 73 years they've known him as a prince. Now many in this crowd are his subjects, the first to greet him as a king.
On behind followed the Queen Consort. Between them, they shook hundreds of hands and even received kisses.
I said, may I kiss you? He said, well, yes.
What was it like to kiss a king?
Oh my God, oh, I nearly fell.
You nearly fell?
Yeah, oh, I'm going to take that kiss forever.
Never wash that cheek?
No, oh, he's lovely.
Oh,
I kissed his hand as well.
You kissed his hand as well?
It was impulsive, but he's lovely. Kissed the king's hand.
Then the King and Queen Consort followed their new path into the palace. They must walk it alone, but with the nation's support. Paul Brand, ITV News, Buckingham Palace.
Well, Royal Editor Chris Shipp is with me here, of course. Some extraordinary scenes today and very poignant speech from the new King.
Yeah, extraordinary scenes. We just saw there the King and the Queen Consort go into Buckingham Palace where he recorded that speech tonight. And you know, when I was listening to it at 6 o'clock, it was one of those speeches where you are struck by hearing one history-making phrase after another. And I think were we to ask ourselves the question tonight, did it meet the moment? I think the answer is yes, absolutely it did. His task was kind of twofold. He had to pay tribute to his late mother, but also someone he knew is considered the grandmother of the nation by so many, but also articulating his job, the job he now has as king. And if you look at the former point I just made, yes, on his mother, he spoke about joining his father on her last great journey. He quoted Hamlet at the end, may flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. And then he was talking about his job as king, an important job that he knows will have to change, and he said that he would no longer be able to devote himself to his energies and charities. What did he mean by that? He couldn't campaign on things like the environment in the same way he has done as Prince of Wales. So, you know, they've clearly been working on that speech for a very, very long time, but I think it really did meet the moment. It rose to the occasion, and you know, he articulated. I think he was speaking for the nation, but also speaking for himself.
And he mentioned Harry and Meghan, didn't he? Which was significant, and crucially, a new Prince and Princess of Wales. Now, what is the significance of that? It wasn't unexpected, was it?
It was unexpected that it was mentioned tonight. So as of 6 p.m. this evening, William and Kate became the Prince and Princess of Wales. A source in Kensington Palace told us this evening that Kate, the Princess of Wales, quotes, appreciates the history associated with this role. What do they mean by that? She obviously understands that that was a role last held by her mother-in-law, the mother-in-law she never met, Princess Diana.
Chris, for the moment, thank you. Well, let's cross straight away to our Wales reporter, Rhys Williams, who's in Cardiff tonight. And Rhys, what's been the reaction where you are to that announcement of the new Prince and Princess of Wales?
Well, an element of shock initially, I think, Mary, because even though the title of the Prince of Wales is generally given to the heir to the throne, we weren't expecting it to happen quite so quickly. King Charles, of course, is someone who has his own very deep connections with Wales. He was, after all, the longest-serving Prince of Wales, being invested at Carnarvon Castle in 1969. And speaking with people here this evening, although there are some who don't feel that Wales needs a new prince, there were some as well who were glad that it was someone like Prince William, who has his own deep connections with Wales and has lived here, of course. Here's a flavour of that reaction.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. I think they're a nice couple. They do everything for charity, and he's the successor, so keep it going, keep it going.
Well, it's something I would have expected anyway, so it's no great shock.
And we've had a statement from the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, who said that King Charles has enjoyed a long and enduring friendship with Wales, and we look forward to deepening our relationship with the new Prince and Princess. And of course, as Chris was saying, the naming of the Duchess of Cornwall as the new Princess of Wales, in and of itself, a very poignant moment.
Rhys Williams in Cardiff, thank you. A packed House of Commons fell silent today as MPs from all sides of the House honoured the Queen and paid their own personal tributes. Many touching stories and some unexpected smiles and humour too, as some shared their favourite memories. As our Deputy Political Editor, Anushka Astana, reports.
Queen Elizabeth II took her throne before any politician here in Parliament ever took their seat.
Hats off, strangers!
Her death brings one of those rarest of moments, when politicians, wherever they sit,
Order, order.
stand together. Prime Minister, former Prime Ministers, leaders, present and past. Liz Truss began.
She was the rock on which modern Britain was built.
The Queen welcomed her 15th Prime Minister just 3 days ago.
Everyone who met her will remember the moment. They will speak of it for the rest of their lives.
On that same day,
she saw off her 14th Prime Minister, and I can tell you, in that audience, she was as radiant and as knowledgeable and as fascinated by politics as ever I can remember.
They spoke of the Queen as a woman.
Starting her reign in what was emphatically then a man's world.
And a grandmother.
And for me, as a grandmother myself, I know and understand the complete love that she had for her family.
And they spoke of a nation's grief.
The loss of our Queen robs this country of its stillest point, its greatest comfort, at precisely the time we need those things most.
But in this chamber where many have met the Queen, there was also laughter, like when Theresa May remembered dropping a block of cheese on the floor during a picnic at Balmoral.
I had a split-second decision to make. I picked up the cheese, put it on the plate and put it on the table. And I turned round to see that my every move had been watched very carefully by Her Majesty the Queen. I looked at her, she looked at me, and she just smiled.
The tributes came from all parties and all nations. Some brought tears.
She was a remarkable person, a remarkable monarch, and we are the poorer for her going.
Others, poetry.
She was our north, our south, our east and west, our working week and our Sunday rest, our noon, our midnight, our talk, our song. We thought that love would last forever. We were wrong.
Anushka Astana, ITV News.
Those warm tributes inside Westminster were reflected by members of the public right around the country. People across the generations and from all backgrounds paid their own respects today, as Garrett Vincent reports.
It was a strange morning that broke across this United Kingdom. A stillness at first. The flags fluttered low. And then the day began. There were jobs to go to and deliveries to be made. But something has changed here. Something is not the same.
God save our gracious Queen.
At school assembly, they sang the anthem as it used to be. The lesson? Someone very special has gone.
She was a really nice person. She looked after the whole entire world, and I love her.
She helped the world a lot, and she's special for everyone.
At midday, the bells tolled, so there was a chance to stop and think. In the streets and in the squares, a very personal sadness could be shared.
It feels like losing my mum all over again. I'm shocked at how upset I am. I'm ex-military, so she was my boss, and but she's always been there. The most amazing woman.
She was my queen throughout her reign. I had a queen that was stoic, that was so diligent to her in her role and her duty, and she did that to the very end. And of that and of her, I am really proud. May her soul rest in complete peace.
For those wanting to pay tribute, the places of worship were the obvious places to go, to light a candle and write in the book. She was honoured too at Friday prayers.
Well, as a Muslim, the first thing we say is Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, which basically means from God we came and to him we return. So effectively that's, as Muslims we know she's gone back to her Lord.
For a few hours the sun shone on the flowers laid in the Queen's memory, and then the rain came again towards the end of a day, the first in so many that she is not here. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
Tomorrow morning we'll see the new king carry out a key constitutional duty. King Charles III will be formally proclaimed monarch at a meeting of the Accession Council at St James's Palace just along the road here. Now, Rebecca Barry is outside the palace tonight. And Rebecca, this ancient tradition is going to be televised, isn't it, for the first time? What are we actually going to see?
Well, we'll see the new king formally proclaimed monarch at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning here in an accession council, which will be additionally historic, if that's possible, because, as you say, what happens behind those walls will be televised for the first time. We'll see the Privy Council proclaim the sovereign, then we'll see the king make a declaration and sign an oath to uphold the security of the church in Scotland. Earlier, I was lucky enough to see a rehearsal with trumpeters sounding a fanfare from that balcony, and I think we can take a look at footage from 1952 when Queen Elizabeth II was proclaimed sovereign. Tomorrow the Garter King of Arms will read the proclamation in public from that balcony, then we'll hear some of the national anthem, followed by a call for 3 cheers for His Majesty the King. Then there'll be a series of proclamations across the United Kingdom. Worth noting, this is not the moment that Charles becomes king. That happened immediately after the Queen's death. This tradition dates back to a time long before rolling news and social media, an opportunity to spread the word that he is our new king.
Rebecca Barry at St James's Palace, thank you. People in the village of Ballater, near Balmoral, had a very special relationship with the Queen. To many, she was not just a monarch, but she was also their neighbour, and they shared their faith and a love of the beautiful surroundings there. From there, Emma Murphy sends this report.
Nestled amid the forests and glens just beyond Balmoral, the village of Ballater has cherished and been cherished by the royal family for generations. And every summer there was one visitor welcomed above all others. A very familiar face in the local shops.
She would pop in and say hello at the time she did come in. We just thought she was our neighbour. When she came into town, the buzz got around, she was in town, maybe doing a bit of shopping. People just left her to get on with it.
Now, as the world mourns, this small village remembers with pride its special relationship with the late Queen.
Yes. I met the Queen 3 weeks ago. We were at Balmoral. I knew she looked a bit frail, but to get the shock of the news yesterday just floored a whole lot of us. Today the community is saddened, but this community will get together and support the new king when he arrives.
Others shared her faith and will seek strength in that. Reverend David Barr has opened the church for the community to mourn.
I'm a boy for the East End of Glasgow. I was an ex-Marine in the Emergencies Forces, 6'3", and when I came down to ring the church bell 70 times for each year that she reigned, I was up in the tower, crying my eyes out. She'd been a major part of our lives. And it just feels
As elsewhere in the world, this community is reflecting on what Queen Elizabeth brought to them.
She was our beacon of hope. She was our steadfast anchor in rough seas. And she was our constant. always with compassion and always with grace. We can't ask for any more than that, not at all. And she gave it happily.
Indeed she did. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Ballater.
Let's go back to Chris Shipp. It's such a moving image, isn't it? The picture of the Queen as we've known her for so long. Now, in terms of that speech, I'd like to return to that. Mixing, wasn't it, of private grief and public duty. What did we learn of what sort of King Charles will be, do you think?
What we learned was that he will model his reign on that of his mother, and just as the Queen in 1947 pledged to serve her whole life, so he too did today. In his words, for the remaining time God grants to me. And when I speak about reigning like his mother as well, I think that we cannot underestimate that point that he made, that he can no longer be that campaigning individual that he was as Prince of Wales. But he did say that he is confident that that work will continue in the trusted hands of others. Who did he mean by that? Well, of course, on things like the environment, he meant the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, who we must now, as of 6 o'clock tonight, call the Prince of Wales. So I think a reign very much modelled on the successful and long reign of his mother.
And a day of history wherever you looked, and that meeting of his public for the first time as king. We've known him as Prince of Wales for many, many years. It's changed, hasn't it?
That was a really significant moment with the crowds there, because before they entered the gates of Buckingham Palace for the first time as King Charles and Queen Consort, they met the members of public who had gathered here. And you could see the redness in his eyes, you could see the emotion and therefore the affection. Don't forget, this is a family which is used to living its private grief in the public sphere, and there was so much affection for him there. There was spontaneous outbursts of God Save the Queen as well. It really was quite a moment, and I think we should step back and reflect on what has happened today and the significance of the speech that he gave, but the crowds that he met outside. And we understand tonight he is now retired to Clarence House, the home he's had for a very long time.
Having heard God Save the King for the first time, Chris, thank you very much. And that brings our special programme to a close on another really historic day for King and country. It was under sombre skies that Charles III left Balmoral today, following the death of his mother there just yesterday afternoon. The King and Queen Consort headed to Buckingham Palace to be greeted by extraordinary scenes, as we've discussed, during a walkabout there, warm smiles, handshakes for the huge crowds who turned out to welcome them. And there was even a kiss for the new king. Then it was through the gates of Buckingham Palace to hold his first audience with his first Prime Minister of his reign, Liz Truss, and it was hers as well, her first time too. So before recording an emotional address to the nation, he thanked his darling mama and he paid tribute to her years of unfaltering devotion, just as so many others have paid their own tributes and thanks for her long life. And that is it from us for now. Julie's here with a special extended news at 10. That's all from Buckingham Palace. Thank you.
Good evening to you. The showers, the longer downpours many of us have had in the last few days gradually fading and easing as the week draws to a close, drying up into the first half of the weekend and feeling a little muggy. Temperatures set to rise as we approach Sunday. The system responsible for the showers and the longer downpours pulling away into the near continent as we head into the weekend. A drier respite for all of us ahead of this rain waiting in the west through the second half of Sunday. And in the meantime, we draw in warmer air from Western Europe, so temperatures up a few degrees and feeling just a little muggier. Showery outbreaks to end the day across the northeast, otherwise a drier, clearer night ahead. And temperatures fall just a few degrees across parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, those temperatures not sliding too far at all, notably mild given the time of year, not much below 15 degrees. And into a new day, a little mist and murk for those up bright and early, but staying quite dull and damp and a little grotty across those eastern locations. A little more cloud cover here with some showers to come. Otherwise better and brighter, particularly through Scotland and Northern Ireland, parts of the southwest. Otherwise a little more cloud cover this Saturday. The sunshine is sure to supply. Hit and miss showers will be fewer and further between compared to the last few days, and highs of around about 21 and 22 degrees. Quite a muggy feel again across the south and the southeast. A fresher day across the north and the west. More and more sunshine into Sunday. A drier picture ahead of the rain moving in from the west later in the day. Feeling warm and muggy through the afternoon.
Now on ITV, Jonathan Dimbleby reflects on the life of Her Majesty.